Have you ever felt the ground give way beneath your feet? Not from fear, but from a wild, impossible coincidence. That night at the bar, I was on the edge. My whole body was trembling, feeling the heavy gaze of the man I'd been running from halfway across the country burning into the back of my neck. I had no plan, only desperation. I just latched onto the first man I saw, begging him to play along, to pretend to be my salvation for just 1 minute. Who knew that minute would become the start of my greatest shame and my greatest love? Because the next morning, that stranger walked into my office, straightened his expensive tie, and looked at me as if he could see right through me. He was my new boss. And now I don't know what's worse, that he knows my secret or that I can't stop thinking about his hands on my shoulders when he shielded me from a ghost from my past. They say you can't run from fate, but I honestly tried. For 6 months, I lived like a shadow, flinching at every sound in the stairwell and never answering calls from unknown numbers. Chicago seemed like the perfect place to disappear, lost among millions of other lonely, perpetually rushing people. I believed the thousands of miles separating me from Boston and from Mark were a solid wall. Turns out I was wrong. That evening, the rain was pouring down as if the sky had decided to wash this city off the face of the earth. I ducked into the Blue October just to wait out the downpour. It was an ordinary bar on the outskirts, dim lighting, the smell of old wood and cheap whiskey. I was sitting in the very corner, clutching a cup of cold tea. And for the first time in a long while, I felt relatively safe. Until the door opened. The bell above the entrance jingled, letting in a gust of damp air, and I automatically looked up. An icy chill ran down my spine. He was standing in the doorway. Mark, in his impeccable coat, which looked so out of place in this setting, with that same expression on his face, calm yet terrifying. He wasn't scanning the room for me. He simply knew I was here. His confidence had always been my cage. My mind went blank. Panic isn't when you scream, it's when everything inside you freezes and your lungs refuse to take in air. I knew if he approached me now, I would turn back into that small, frightened Emma who had to justify every breath she took. I looked around. A couple of meters away from me, at the bar, sat a man, alone, focused on his glass, wearing a simple dark jacket. I couldn't see his face, but there was something steady, reliable in his posture. Without thinking, I grabbed my bag and slid onto the stool next to his. "Please," I whispered, on the verge of tears, clutching his sleeve. "Just put your arm around me. Pretend we're together. There's a very dangerous man watching me. Please." I could feel myself shaking. The man slowly turned his head. He had remarkably calm, deep-set eyes and light stubble. He didn't pull away. He didn't laugh. He just studied me carefully, then glanced over at Mark, who was already heading our way, and suddenly he simply placed his heavy, warm palm on my shoulder. "Easy now," he said quietly. His voice was low and so confident that for the first time that evening, I let out a breath. "It's okay." He pulled me close, and I buried my face in his jacket, which smelled of rain and cedar. In that moment, I didn't care who he was. In that moment, he was my only salvation in the whole world. I felt Mark freeze just a few steps away from us. The bar was noisy, some old jazz was playing, but for me the world had narrowed down to the size of this bar counter and the scent of cedar coming from the stranger's jacket. I couldn't see Mark's face, but I could sense his confusion on my skin, quickly replaced by his familiar, cold rage. "Emma?" His voice sounded above my ear like the crack of a whip. "What is this? I've been looking for you all over the country, and you're here, with someone?" I clung to the stranger even tighter. My fingers turned white, gripping the thick fabric of his sleeve. I expected him to politely pull away now, to say he didn't want to get involved in other people's problems. After all, in Chicago, you don't meddle in other people's business, especially when it smells of a major scandal. But Ethan, I didn't know his name yet, didn't even flinch. He slowly turned to Mark, his hand on my shoulder remaining just as firm and protective. "Do you have a problem, buddy?" he asked. His voice was calm, almost lazy, but there was such steel in it that Mark involuntarily took a step back. "That's my girlfriend!" Mark hissed, and I felt the same obsession I'd been running from boiling in his words. "And she's just a little confused. Emma, get up, we're leaving." I held my breath. This was the moment of truth. But my savior suddenly smirked. He didn't yell or wave his fists. He just looked at Mark as if he were an annoying fly. "I believe the lady has made it quite clear who she wants to spend this evening with, and judging by how she trembles at the sight of you, she stopped being yours long ago. So turn around and walk out the same door you came in, before I call security or handle the matter myself." Mark opened his mouth, about to shout something. I saw a vein throbbing on his temple, but meeting this man's gaze, he suddenly deflated. He was only ever strong with those weaker than him. After shooting me a look full of poison, he turned and stormed out of the bar, slamming the door so hard the glasses on the shelves rattled. Silence hung in the room. I slowly pulled away from my protector, feeling tears streaming down my face. It wasn't crying, it was simply the release of the colossal tension I'd been living under for the past months. "Thank you," I whispered, wiping my cheeks with the back of my hand. "God, I'm so sorry, that was so stupid, and I didn't know what else to do." The man slid his untouched glass of water toward me. "Drink," he said curtly, "and don't apologize. There are situations where any strategy is good if it works. Are you okay?" I nodded, though I was still trembling slightly. We sat like that for about 10 minutes. He didn't question me, didn't try to hit on me or ask for my number. We just sat there, two strangers in rainy Chicago. "My name is Ethan, and my advice to you, change your route home tonight, just in case." I looked at him. His face seemed carved from stone in the dim bar light, but there was a kind of weary kindness in the corners of his eyes. "Emma," I replied. "Thank you, Ethan. You have no idea what you just saved me from." I left first without looking back. The whole way home, I kept checking if I was being followed, and when I got to my small apartment, I locked the door with all the bolts and sat in the dark for a long time, hugging my knees. I thought about how this meeting was just a bright episode, a coincidence that would never happen again. If only I had known that 36 hours later, this same man would be standing in front of our entire department while I frantically adjusted my blouse, wishing I could disappear into the ground. That the scent of cedar and rain would become for me not a symbol of salvation, but the brand of my biggest secret. I spent the whole of Sunday evening in a daze. You know that feeling when you understand life has given you a tiny chance, but inside a premonition of disaster still gnaws at you? I kept smoothing the sleeve of my jacket, which still seemed to carry the scent of that stranger, a mix of cold rain and something sharp, masculine. Ethan. A simple name, but it pulsed in my head like a heartbeat. I fell asleep with the thought that I would never see him again, which was both a relief and a quiet sadness. On Monday morning, Chicago greeted me with a gray sky and its usual bustle. I put on my strictest gray suit, my armor, in which I felt like just a cog in the huge machine of the advertising agency Madison and Partners. An unhealthy buzz filled the office. Colleagues huddled by the coffee machine, whispering, and their faces made it clear. A storm was coming. "Emma, have you heard?" Sarah, our lead designer, grabbed my elbow. "The liquidator from New York has landed, the new CEO. They say he cut half the staff at his last agency in 1 week. There's a company-wide meeting in the conference room now." My knees were already weak from the encounter with Mark, and now this. I felt like I was walking to the gallows. We all crammed into the huge room with glass walls. The air was so thick with fear and cheap office perfume that it was hard to breathe. Our old director, Mr. Green, fussed at the podium, wiping sweat from his brow. "Friends," he began in a trembling voice, "I'd like to introduce you to the man who will lead our reorganization, Mr. Ethan Blackwood." The door at the end of the hall opened, and time simply stopped for me. He walked down the aisle, the very same man from the bar. But now he wasn't wearing a wet jacket. He was in a three-piece suit that probably cost as much as my apartment. He walked confidently, with a measured step, and everything about him radiated power, coldness, and distance. That calm gaze that had shielded me from Mark 2 days ago was now scanning the room with professional detachment. I felt the blood drain from my face. I wanted to become invisible, to sink into the chair, to fall through this polished floor. He stepped onto the podium, swept his eyes across the room, and for a second, it felt like an eternity, his gaze rested on me. His eyebrows twitched almost imperceptibly, but his face remained stony. He began to speak. His voice was the same, low, velvety, with notes of steel. He spoke of efficiency, of shedding dead weight, of a new era for the company. And I just sat there thinking only one thing. He saw me broken. He saw me cry on his shoulder. He knows I'm a problem girl with a crazy ex. The very first name on the layoff list will be mine. I didn't hear the end of his speech. When everyone started to disperse, I bolted for the exit, trying not to look toward the podium. But right at the door, the secretary's voice caught up with me. "Emma Lawrence, Mr. Blackwood would like to see you in his office in 10 minutes. At that moment, I understood that my escape from Boston seemed to have ended right here in the sterile office corridor, and this time I had no one to ask for protection. The CEO's office on the 40th floor looked exactly as the office of a man accustomed to wielding fate should look. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago, a heavy desk of dark wood, and that damned scent, cedar, leather, and expensive coffee. The very scent that just yesterday seemed like the aroma of safety, and today became the smell of my downfall. I stood by the door, clutching the folder with my project so hard that my knuckles turned white. Ethan was sitting in a leather chair with his back to me, looking at the city. "Come in, Emma. Have a seat," he said without turning around. I walked to the desk on stiff legs and sank on the edge of a chair. My heart was pounding somewhere in my throat. I wanted to speak first, to explain myself, to say that I wasn't crazy, that the incident at the bar was an unfortunate misunderstanding, but the words stuck. He slowly turned around. His face was impenetrable. In the expensive glow of the office lights, he seemed even more unattainable than in the bar. He wore an impeccable tie, and not a single detail reminded me of the Ethan who had held me close, saving me from Mark. He began to speak. His voice was the same, low, velvety, with notes of steel. He spoke of efficiency, of shedding dead weight, of a new era for the company. And I just sat there thinking only one thing. He saw me broken. He saw me cry on his shoulder. He knows I'm a problem girl with a crazy ex. The very first name on the layoff list will be mine. I didn't hear the end of his speech. When everyone started to disperse, I bolted for the exit, trying not to look toward the podium. But right at the door, the secretary's voice caught up with me. "Emma Lawrence, Mr. Blackwood would like to see you in his office in 10 minutes. At that moment, I understood that my escape from Boston seemed to have ended right here in the sterile office corridor, and this time I had no one to ask for protection. I find it easier to focus that way, Mr. Blackwood. Or you simply don't want to be seen." He finally looked up. It was a point-blank shot. There was no mockery in his eyes, only a strange, cold perceptiveness. "You looked different on Saturday, Emma." I felt my face flush with heat. "Listen," I whispered, forgetting all about hierarchy. "What happened at the bar, I am infinitely grateful to you, but I didn't know who you were. If you think my presence here, that my personal drama hurts the company's image, I can submit my resignation right now." Ethan suddenly slammed the folder shut and leaned back in his chair. A shadow of that same smirk I'd seen at the Blue October flickered on his lips. "Resignation? So you can run away again as soon as things get tough?" He stood up and walked to the window. "I'm not here to dig into your past, Emma. I need talent, not shadows. But I need to know. That man, does he still pose a threat to you?" That question knocked the air out of me. He wasn't asking as a boss. Something human, almost personal, slipped into his voice. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I hope not." "Good. Then let's get back to work." His tone turned icy again. "There's an investor presentation for Global Corp tonight. Have you prepared the strategy?" "Yes, but it still needs—" "You'll finalize it here, in my office. At 8, everyone will be gone, and we won't be disturbed. I need you to be the best version of yourself, Emma, the one who doesn't tremble before ghosts." I left the office on shaky legs. For the rest of the day, I caught the glances of my colleagues. They saw I had spent over 20 minutes with the liquidator. They had already started crossing my name off the list of the living, and I couldn't figure out what I was more afraid of, being fired, or what would happen at 8 when we were alone in this glass castle above the city. When the clock struck 8, the office was deserted. The silence was almost tangible. I knocked on his door. "Come in," came from inside. He had taken off his jacket and undone the top button of his shirt. His tie was loosened. Like this, he became frighteningly similar to that man from the bar again. We worked for 3 hours. He was a harsh critic, making me redo the slides over and over until they were perfect. At one point, as we both leaned over the laptop discussing charts, his hand accidentally brushed against mine. It was like an electric shock. I jerked back sharply, and my pencil rolled across the table. "I'm sorry," I exhaled. Ethan didn't move his hand away. He slowly turned his head and looked at me. There were barely 10 centimeters between us. I could see every tiny wrinkle at the corners of his eyes, could feel his breath. "Are you still afraid of me, Emma?" he asked quietly. "You're my boss," I replied, though my heart treacherously skipped a beat. "It's normal to feel awkward. We're from different worlds, Ethan. You decide who works and who doesn't, and I'm just trying to survive." That night at the bar, there were no worlds. He took a step closer. "There was only you and me, and I can still feel how you trembled in my arms." I knew I should leave, knew it was professional suicide. But when he closed the distance and his lips touched mine, I realized all the walls I had built for so long had crumbled in a single second. It was a kiss mixed with desperation, fear, and some insane, wrong kind of hope. I kissed him back, forgetting about Mark, my career, about having to call him Mr. Blackwood again tomorrow morning. In that moment, I wasn't an employee. I was just a woman who had finally stopped running. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I had committed a crime. You know that burning mix of elation and icy horror when you realize you've crossed a line from which there is no turning back? I stared at the ceiling of my bedroom, replaying every second in my head. His hands on my waist, the soft rustle of his breath, and how the professional mask of Ethan Blackwood crumbled, revealing something alive, hungry, and sincere. I walked to the office as if heading to my execution. I put on the most conservative dress, pulled my hair into a tight bun, trying to look as official as possible. But the moment I crossed the agency's threshold, reality hit me full force. The world of big bosses and little clerks isn't a Cinderella story. It's a glass ceiling you smash your head against the moment you try to soar. In the elevator, I ran into Sarah and a couple of guys from the creative department. The conversation instantly died. They looked at me as if everything that had happened in the 40th floor office was written on my forehead. "They say the presentation went well," Sarah said with a strained smile, but her eyes told a different story. "We know how you earned your spot, dear." All day, I felt like a target. I saw Ethan walking down the hallway, just as impeccable, cold, unattainable. He didn't even glance my way when giving instructions to the department head. And that hurt more than the gossip. Everything inside me screamed, was I just a way for him to blow off steam after work? But in the evening, as I was getting ready to leave, my phone beeped. A short message. Come down to the underground parking lot, Sector B. There, in the semi-darkness among concrete pillars, stood his black SUV. Ethan was waiting inside. When I got in the car, he didn't say anything, just took my hand and intertwined his fingers with mine. Emma, I know what you're feeling right now. I see the way they look at you, but I don't care about them, and you shouldn't care about what they think, only about yourself. We drove to a small restaurant in the suburbs where no one could recognize us, and there, at a table in the farthest corner, I felt the chasm between us with my entire being. He ordered wine that cost as much as my monthly rent, he discussed corporate mergers in London, and I couldn't stop thinking about how my mass-market shoes looked pathetic next to his handcrafted loafers. Ethan, this is insane, I whispered, picking up my salad with a fork. You're the CEO who came to clean up the company. I'm a junior employee with a suitcase of problems and a psychopath on my tail. If anyone finds out, you'll be accused of bias and I'll just be destroyed. You're from another world. You're used to taking what you want, and I'm used to hiding. He leaned forward and his gaze became frighteningly serious. Do you think my world protects me from loneliness or fear? I've been surrounded my whole life by people who only want my signature on a contract. That night at the bar, I didn't see an employee. I saw a person who genuinely needed help, and for the first time in a long time, I wanted to be that savior, not for profit. That evening, he told me about his father, who had kept him in the same iron grip that Mark had kept me, about how he had broken himself to become who he is now. We were alike in our brokenness, despite our different bank accounts. But when he drove me to my house, a modest 2-story building in a less affluent neighborhood, and I saw his car against the backdrop of peeling paint, reality stabbed my heart again. He kissed me goodbye, and that kiss tasted of inevitable loss. I entered my apartment without turning on the lights. The red light on the answering machine was blinking. My heart sank. I pressed the button, and Mark's familiar, insinuating voice filled the room. Nice car, Emma. And a handsome boss you've got. Did you really think I'd leave you alone just because you found yourself a rich sugar daddy? See you soon, honey. I slid down the wall, covering my face with my hands. My fragile castle of glass and hope was beginning to crumble, and I understood. My affair with Ethan wasn't just a mistake. It could be the end for both of us. The message from Mark on the answering machine was like an icy shower, washing away all the warmth from the previous evening. I sat on the floor in the hallway, staring at the blinking red light, and realized my illusion of safety had turned to dust. Mark hadn't just found me, he'd seen Ethan and me together. And now this shadow from the past threatened not only me, but also the person who, for the first time in a long while, had made me breathe freely. I didn't sleep all night. Images spun in my head. Ethan in his impeccable office, Ethan in that cheap bar, and Mark with his cold, calculated madness. I knew what I had to do. I had to leave. Disappear again before his poison tainted Ethan's life. For people like Ethan Blackwood, reputations are built over years but can be destroyed by a single newspaper headline about a scandal with an employee and her criminal ex. In the morning, I arrived at the office early to write my resignation letter. My hands trembled as I signed it. I didn't go to his office. I simply left the envelope on his secretary's desk and went to pack my things in the marketing department. The colleagues hadn't arrived yet. The office was filled with that crisp silence that exists just before the workday begins. "And where are you planning to go, Emma?" I flinched. Ethan was standing in the doorway of my department. Without his jacket, in just a shirt with rolled-up sleeves, he held my opened envelope in his hands. His face showed no anger, only a kind of infinite, weary resolve. "I can't, Ethan," I whispered, trying not to look him in the eye. "He found me. He saw us. He'll ruin everything. You don't need these problems. You're a big man. You have a career, a future, and I'm just a burden." Ethan came right up to me, forcing me to raise my head. He didn't hug me, he just placed his hands on the desk on either side of me, trapping me in that space. "Do you think I climbed my way from a broke student to CEO to back down from some coward who only knows how to threaten women?" His voice vibrated with restrained strength. "Emma, look at me. I spent half the night yesterday with lawyers and security. We've already filed a restraining order. Your Mark won't get within a mile of you if he doesn't want to spend the next few years behind bars." "But your status, the people in the office," I sobbed. "They'll say that I—" "Let them talk," he interrupted. "In this world, people will always talk. If you live looking over your shoulder at the whispers behind your back, you'll never leave the cage he put you in. Yes, I'm your boss. Yes, I'm from a different world, as you say. But that world is empty if there's no one in it you want to come home to." He pulled out my resignation letter, slowly tore it into tiny pieces, and dropped it into the trash can. "You are not fired, Emma Lawrence. You have a lot of work to do today. And we have dinner tonight, this time at the most ordinary place that serves the best burgers in town. And I don't care what my board of directors thinks." 3 months have passed. Mark has disappeared from my horizon. Ethan knows how to solve problems decisively and firmly. People in the office still sometimes whisper when we leave the parking lot together, but I no longer feel the urge to shrink away and hide my gaze. I still feel awkward when he gives me expensive gifts, and I still can't believe this man chose me. But when we sit on his terrace in the evening, looking at the lights of Chicago, I understand. It's not about money or titles. It's about the fact that in that bar, two lonely, wounded people simply recognized each other at a glance. Life hasn't become perfect, and I still sometimes flinch at unexpected phone calls. But now, when I smell cedar and rain, I know I'm no longer alone. And that is probably the greatest victory I've ever won over my fear. We're from different worlds, yes, but in that moment when he placed his hand on my shoulder, we created our own world, and I won't let anyone destroy it anymore.